Guys, welcome back. Now this isn't going to be a typical reading vlog, purely because I'm not going to have any control of what I'm reading, and that's because I started TBR Jar a while ago, a long time ago. You can see it there it is. But I hardly ever pick stuff out of it, because I am a mood reader, so I'll just pick up stuff, or I'll pick something out of it and then just never read it, and it goes back in the jar. So I decided that I'm going to read stuff out there. Now, I have one already. So one book I picked out of there the other day was The Steep and Thorny Way by Cat Winters, which is a Hamlet retelling. Did not know that. So this one I picked out. And then I just grabbed the jar. I picked another book out there, which is, I don't know if you can read my atrocious handwriting, but it's Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. Because I read Chain of Gold, Jesus, last year before, can't remember when I read that, but I've read Chain of Gold. So Chain of Iron was in it, and I'm gonna pick 3 more out of my TBR jar, and we shall see what comes out, because I know there's quite a few books in here that are on my shelves or on my Kindle that I got purely for the sake of getting. I had no intention of reading them. Like, you can see the House of Earth and Blood. I bought it because it was pretty. I have no intention of reading it. Me and Sarah J. Maas have big issues. That is in here. I don't want that to come out. So I'm going to pick 3. So let's go for our number 1. So we have Frostblood by Ellie Blake. I think. Yeah. YA fantasy? Not something I read much of nowadays. You can tell I made this back when I was in my big fantasy phase. YA fantasy. So I'll pick number 2. Ooh, Vicious by V. Schwab. This year I did read Gallant, and I did like her slightly darker fantasy. So we'll see. And number 3, Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler. I think that's how you pronounce it. And just to make it an even number, because this is currently 5, I'm going to pick 1 more. Ooh, Half. Half is a funny one because it's a self-published indie book, but I don't currently own book 1. And these is the kind of book I want to have a physical copy of. I have 2 and 3 over there, but I don't have 1. So I will change this one, purely because I want to own all 3 before I binge read that series. Let's see what we have. Ooh, 3 Body Problem. Don't ask me to pronounce the author's name, because I will butcher it, but I think it's Xing Li. So give me a minute and I will collect all of these books. I went and collected all the books. This is a strange mix. So, Three Body Problem by Xing Li. All I know about this is it's very sci-fi heavy, science heavy sci-fi. I have got a lot more into sci-fi. I've recently read the first 3 books in the Dune universe and loved them. So I am excited to give this a go. This one is about 430 pages long. So not small. So we will give that a go. Then we have Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler. Didn't know anything about this. I know it's book 1 in the Burning Blade and Silver Eye series. Yeah, seems... I'm not sure, fantasy-esque? Like, darker fantasy maybe. It's giving me, reading the synopsis, it's giving me sort of like Nevernight vibes, you know, training school, kind of vibes. So this is a hefty book. This is just under 650 pages. So just these two are 1,000 pages. What have I left myself in for? Now, Vicious, it is really shiny. It's my ex-library copy, so by V. Schwab. I still don't know what this series is about. I've heard so much about the main characters, Victor and Eli, and I've seen so many like TikToks and fan-made videos. But I don't actually know the plot, so... Ooh, Prison Break. Prison Break sounds interesting. But I'm not sure, like, V. Schwab, I read him middle grade series. I read the City of Bones series, the Cassidy Blake series. Really enjoyed that. I read Gallant. It was okay. There were issues with it, but it was a pretty solid dark fantasy. And that's all I've read by V. Schwab. I haven't read the Darker Shade of Magic series. I did attempt to read book 1 years ago and DNF'd it at like 30%. I was just so confused. And I haven't read this duology or the Our Dark Duet, is it what it's called, series? So I haven't read a lot by V. Schwab, but maybe this will change my mind. We'll see. Now, classic YA fantasy, Frostblood by Ellie Blake. Yeah, it seems like your typical YA kind of fantasy. Oh, you can see I did try and read it before. I still have the bookmark in it. Apparently I stopped reading this at 136 pages in. I don't know why. That was a very long time ago. It would have been just after this was released. So yeah, I have no idea what this is about. I don't remember. But the synopsis sounds very YA fantasy. Also, book depository. Really cool little bookmark. I like that. We'll wait and see. I also didn't tell you that Vicious is just under 350 pages long, and Frostblood is 370. So we're racking up the pages here. Steep and Thorny Way, historical Hamlet retelling, following a young mixed-race girl called Hannah Lee. And this is 320 pages long. And next we have what I assume is going to be the biggest boy of them all. It might not be, actually. I think Ashes of the Sun might be slightly longer. Here it is. Chain of Iron. This is the collector's first edition from Waterstones. I don't know how to feel about this. Like, honestly. Me and Cassandra Clare got such a love-hate relationship going on. So, let me just explain my journey with Cassandra Clare. I read the Mortal Instruments when I was younger. Adored them. Reread them as an adult. Absolutely hated them. Like, oh my god, so many problems. Thought I was done with Cassandra Clare, and then I was like, no, I'm done. Even though when I was rereading the Mortal Instruments, she currently had out the Infernal Devices trilogy. And we got the announcement for Chain of Gold. It's a long time. And one of my friends said to me, she said, look, I didn't really like rereading the Mortal Instruments either, but please give the Infernal Devices a chance. So, very close friend of mine, I was like, oh, okay, read them. I fucking adored the Infernal Devices. Like, Gem is my absolute fucking baby, and it was one of the first books, no, the only book I have read so far that has done a love triangle right. I won't spoil it, but most love triangles in YA fantasy are handled appallingly. Every author that's thinking about putting a love triangle in their books should read the Infernal Devices. That is how you do it right, especially in a fantasy set. Especially if you've got one character who's immortal. That is how you do it. So I was like, okay. Cassandra Clare's stepped up her game. I'm going to try out Chain of Gold. So I bought Chain of Gold. I did unhaul it. But I read it. I gave it 3 stars. I saw the potential there. But there were issues. Grace, I hate. Hate with a burning passion. I hate Grace. I didn't really like James. Or Lucy Herondale. Neither of them seemed to menacing. The character that stole my heart and owns it is Matthew. Matthew is my baby, especially if you read the short stories, which I've been doing. I've been reading the short stories chronologically. So you understand why Matthew needs a hug. And Jessie as well. Jessie. We won't talk about Jessie, but and it would have been less than that. It would have been like 2.5 stars. Chain of Gold would have been. But there was one scene in the Whispering Room that made it 3 stars. Because I was like, is Cassie going to step up her game like Sarah J. Maas did and give us that good smut? That really hints at it. So I was like, God, please. Might be the only way I get through these books because they are hefty. So Chain of Iron sits at just over 570 pages. And I'm scared. And I think the reason I'm scared is because the so-called main characters, who in the first book anyway were James, Lucy and Cordelia, I didn't really like any of them. Like, you don't see much of Lucy. Well, you see her, but she doesn't do a lot in the first book. James does a lot, but he's a bit of an asshole. And then Cordelia is, I hate to say it, she's a bit of a wet blanket until the end. Until the end, when she has her moment, she's an absolute fucking wet blanket. There's no substance to the girl. And my favourite characters, Jesse and Matthew, you don't see a lot of them. And I don't know. So this has been sat on my shelf since it came out. And I know, I don't know when it's coming out, but there's been a lot more news coming out around Chain of Thorns, the final book in this trilogy. So I will get to this eventually. And then I'm not going to reread the Mortal Instruments. Well, I might do it again. I don't know. I might reread it after I've read all of these. After Chain of Thorn comes out, and because that's the next step chronologically in the story. I know we get Red Scrolls of Magic and the Lost Book of the White come in between there. And then we have the Dark Artificer series. And then books are huge. So, I'm not sure. In terms of reading order, I'm probably going to start off with these two. Steep and Thorny Way, because I've read a book from Kat Winters before I read Odd and True, and even though I didn't particularly like it, her writing is very easy to read. And her stories tend to be fairly interesting. And then Frostblood, because YA fantasy does tend to be both really fast-paced and have a simpler writing style. So that one will probably be next. Then I'm going to have to break these up. So I'll probably end up moving out of fantasy and go to the three-body problem, to sci-fi. And get through this. Don't know how easy that's going to be. It's not very long, but it's going to be a bit dense, I think. And I probably will get the audiobook as well. Maybe. If I'm struggling. And then I'll stick to something that's fantasy, but kind of sounds like it might have some sci-fi-ish elements, and I will go to Vicious. This one is the one that might put me in a reading slump, because I've got a major up and down relationship with V. Schwab's writing, depending on what genre she's writing for. So her middle grade stuff, really easy to read, loved it. Her YA/adult-ish stuff, I find it a lot harder to get through. So I'll put this one there. Then I've got Ty, because these are the two big books. So after, if I get to this one and I enjoy it and I'm riding a high, I will probably go into Chain of Thorns next, Chain of Iron next. Because this one I might struggle with. But if I get to this and I didn't really like it and I'm feeling like I need to pick me up, I will probably go to Ashes of the Sun. Even though I haven't read anything by Django Wexler before, I have heard really good things about their books, and I'm a sucker for high fantasy. Like, I've got Game of Thrones, got Eye of the World, I've got the Stormlight Archives. I love me a bit of high fantasy. So this order will depend on how my reading of Vicious goes. So, that is my reading order for my TBR Jar readathon. And I'll keep you updated on how it's going. sent in to the Stephen Thornley way. Obviously, we get the primary setup of the story is based off of Hamlet. So, Hanley's father was supposedly killed in a hit-and-run accident, and 16-year-old Joe Adder went to prison for almost 2 years, and now he's been released on good behaviour and come back to their town. Hanley ends up going to speak with Joe, and Joe is the one to tell her that he didn't kill her father Hank, but he thinks her stepfather Clyde did. Clyde Coning is the local doctor, and Joe thinks he's affiliated with the KKK. And this plays on Hanley's existing doubts, because she's always doubted Clyde and his affections for her mother, purely because she knows Clyde was interested in her mother Greta before her father died, and her mother and father's marriage wasn't even recognised by a lot of people because it was a marriage between a white woman and a black man, which 1920s America, prohibition, segregation, we got a lot of that going on. And the story Joe tells is that yes, he did hit Hank with his car, but Hank had a broken leg and a sore arm, but he was jovial, he was making jokes, he was talking, seemed absolutely fine. He took Hank to his house and called Clyde, being the doctor, and it was only after Clyde came to see Hank that he died. And Joe mentions a comment Hank made before he died about the doctor being the death of him, and to make sure nothing happened to Hanley. Obviously, Hanley is still very torn up over her father's death. She's dealing with a lot of grief, a lot of anger, and the local rumour mill about her father's ghost appearing all over the place, that even her best friend Fleur agrees with, because she's supposedly seen Hank as well, Hank's ghost as well. It's just making things worse. Now, this setup is interesting. Yes, we have the original plotline of Hamlet, but we've also got Prohibition era, so we have bootleggers. We've also got a lot of racial elements going on with the KKK being around, and our main protagonist being mixed race. But I often find that with retellings, they stick so close to the original story that there's nothing surprising about them, and they end up just being very run-of-the-mill because you already know the story. So there's no twists or anything. So I'm hoping this isn't the case, but I'm going to have to wait and see. So I'm a quarter of the way through the Stephen Thornley way. And it's getting kind of interesting, but I'm not sure. So Hanley, her friend Mildred, ends up giving her a tonic to take to try and communicate with her father's ghost. Takes some convincing, but she eventually does it. And she also knows Mildred's family are bootlegging alcohol and making a lot of money. So she takes this tonic, follows the instructions that Mildred give her, and goes to the stretch of road where her father was hit. And there she ends up seeing his ghost, and he confirmed Joe's story, that while Joe did hit him with the car, it didn't kill him, and he blames Clyde for that. Hanley immediately goes to Joe and tells her that she knows he's innocent, that she believes he's innocent, and that Clyde killed her father. And Joe is straightforward and honest with her and tells her basically the only way you're going to get rid of Clyde is to kill him. Which neither Joe or Hannah are happy about, because Joe isn't a killer and neither is Hannah. So I'm interested to see where that goes. But he mentions doing something else and being arrested for another crime. And initially he doesn't want to tell Hannah what it is, but she gives him an ultimatum basically. She was like, if you tell me what this other crime was, I will trust you no matter what happens. And he confesses to it that he is homosexual. He's gay. Obviously, in 1920s America, that is an arrestable offence. You can go to prison for it. You can be killed for it. And then the next day, the deputies come to talk to Hannah Lee, basically saying, look, we know Joe is back in town. Have you been seeing him? Have you been talking to him? Essentially interrogating her to find out where Joe is. And she ends up lying to them and telling them that Joe has left town, and to stop interrogating her. But she also asks questions of her own about whether Joe did commit the crime, whether his lawyer shut him up, whether he was beaten by the police, etc. And she makes a snarky comment about Clyde being her stepfather. Emphasis on the step. Making her displeasure of him known, especially now she knows what he has done. But I have a funny feeling she's going to have to prove it, or she is going to have to kill him. So we're only a quarter of the way through now, so I'm like, we aren't that far into the story. I'm only 82 pages in. So it's coming down to two options. Hannah Lee is either going to have to prove without a shadow of a doubt that Clyde killed her father, not Joe, which, given her ambitions to be a lawyer, she might actually do, or she is going to have to kill him. But I will check back in with you again around the halfway mark. So I'm halfway through the Steep and Thorny Way now, and it's cool. Nothing major going on. After Hannah Lee basically confronts Clyde, and he absolutely loses his shit. She runs. She thinks she's going to kill him. He's going to kill her, and she runs. She runs to Joe, and they leg it. In the middle of the night, they end up spending the night in the woods, but they come across a few boys who they know are affiliated with the KKK, and they come up with a story on the fly about eloping, even though they would be an interracial couple, which isn't legal in their state, and Joe is gay. But they make it work. But they know they can't run much further because they don't have supplies or anything, and they would starve or freeze before they go anywhere, and it would leave Clyde alive. So he takes Hannah Lee home, and Hannah Lee tells the same story to her mother and the police, that they were going to elope. She felt guilty and came home, and he's headed to Washington. But Clyde is pushing and pushing Hannah Lee to leave her father's death alone, and she isn't gonna do it. He's like, oh, it's time we put your father to rest now. She's like, hell no, my father's not resting at peace. I've seen his ghost. He's told me you murdered him. And shit's about to go down, but she's still not happy about having to kill Clyde. She wants to find a legal way because she wants to be a lawyer. And Joe keeps saying that you're never going to find a legal way to put these kind of men in prison, especially if they're affiliated with the KKK. So Hannah Lee is really torn morally about what to do. Yeah, it's interesting. It's pretty fast paced and easy to read, but it doesn't seem to be anything kind of special going on. It seems to be, at this point, a direct retelling of Hamlet. Near enough. So I'm hoping in the second half, there is some twist or something that gives a fresh spin on the story. But I'll just have to wait and see, and I'll check back in again about the 3/4 mark. So I'm just over 3/4 of the way through now. And God, that got good. So basically, a quick run there. Hannah Lee spoke to her father's ghost again. And he explains that when he said dock, he blamed the dock. He didn't mean dock as in doctor, as in Clyde. He meant dock as in Dry Dock, the restaurant in town. And this confuses the hell out of Hannah Lee. Because her father is saying that Clyde had nothing to do with his death. So she does her thing. She does the digging. And she figures out that the KKK is in their town. And it's recruiting. And it's basically wiping out anyone that's undesirable, running them out of town, and stuff like that. And she finds out her father was bootlegging alcohol on Christmas Eve because they were tight of money. And he, being a kind-hearted man, wanted Hannah Lee to have a really nice Christmas. And he ended up taking alcohol down to the Dry Dock, where the clan were waiting for him. And they performed a mock lynching, or what they refer to as a necktie party. And this scared Hank so much he was essentially having a heart attack when he stumbled out into the road and was hit by Joe. So when Clyde was summoned, Hank was already dying. He was having a serious heart attack, and that's what killed him. So Joe is partly to blame, but if he hadn't been tortured by clan members, he probably would have survived. So Hannah Lee does some more digging into the clan in the Dry Dock, and she finds on a tree there her father's name and a couple of other people and how they've been crossed out because they're dead. But her name is on there, so is Joe's, and so are her parents. And her stepfather, they're all on there, which means they are basically on the clan's hit list to kill. So they end up running around trying to figure out what the hell to do because they're in serious danger. So they get together, get their belongings together, and Hannah Lee goes to get Joe. However, Lawrence turns up in this, and he's associated with the clan. But he's came to give Joe a warning to get out of town. And we learn it's because the boy Joe was caught with was Lawrence. But Joe kept him out of it. Kept his name out of it because he wasn't found. Joe was. And that's that. But now they've all got targets on their back. Purely because Joe, because he is gay. Hannah Lee, because she's mixed race. Greta, because she married a black man. And Clyde, not only because he's taken Hannah Lee in after marrying her mother, but because he lied in court and threw Joe under the bus to protect Hannah Lee. So Joe is good. Clyde is a good guy. Like, I feel sorry for like hating on him earlier in the book. Like, he a good guy. So now I have no idea what Hannah Lee is gonna do. Like, she's got her gun, she's got a nice amount of bullets, so she could go like full Rambo or, you know, something on this and just shoot the shit out of them. But I think she's cleverer than that, so I don't know what's going to happen in the final 50 odd pages, but I just finished The Steep and Thorny Way, and no words, just please read this book. Oh, I can't tell you how much I love that ending. Like, the friendship between Hannah Lee and Joe. And watching Clyde, literally, the end of this book made me tear up. I'm still teary. I'm like, I can't. This was so damn good. Like, the story, the first kind of half, you are like, oh, this is just a boring old retelling of Hamlet. The second half, the social and racial commentary in here, absolutely amazing. The representation we get is amazing, and just the message this sends out was beautiful. Like, I'm gonna have to read more by Kat Winters to decide where I stand with it, because Odd and True was like a 2.753 stars, I think I gave it. This is a definite 5 stars. This is beautiful. I've got a couple of other ones. I think I've got The Shadow of Blackbirds. And I think I've got Cure for Dreaming as well. Cure for Dreaming was her debut. So I'm going to have to give both of those a go to decide where I stand with Kat Winters. But I think they're earlier than this book and Odd and True. They're the newest ones. But yeah, just read this. Like, if you want a book that has good representation in terms of sexuality and race, with an absolutely banging plot, full of twists and turns, and just some amazing character work, definitely pick up The Steep and Thorny Way. I can't recommend it enough. I'm going to be banging on about this one for a long time.